This is one of those shows that I kind of wish I discovered when it was already over, so I'd have every episode at my disposal. This is a show that I would love to be able to binge every episode at once, but a weekly experience is definitely going to be fun in its own way too. Makoto is building, I would think, in some ways, a familiar Monster Girl harem, but on the flip side, when you have characters like Emma, most likely going to be a part of it, the relationships and the way I think characters are growing very fond of Makoto, there's a slight deviation to the normal formula that I think because the show over 2 episodes hasn't took itself overly serious, there's potential for serious stuff for sure. But I mean, when you go from last week having a dragon want to be with you and is willing to do anything that seemingly you ask of it so it can watch historical dramas, or you have a very overly obsessed spider who probably wants to please you as well in any way you want, and seemingly the catch for this one is that it wants your blood probably, and then you have Emma, the pig orc looking character who is like the typical waifu kind of material, but, you know, physically doesn't really fit the bill that we're typically used to. This show and the way it's building this dude's monster harem is definitely entertaining to say the least. I mean, I think anyone who enjoys kind of like the civilization building of something like, say, that time I got reincarnated as a slime, will enjoy basically Sheen's like little kind of like area in her own little world there, the mist that you can transfer over to, and basically because they're kind of linked together, Makoto and her, they kind of have like this perfect land where you could probably grow any crop, while the things from his own world seemingly are there from vegetables and fruits and things like that. It just is really cool to just watch these creatures who clearly weren't doing the best. They were living in rundown homes, didn't look like you could grow shit there, probably didn't have much water, and their food situation was probably pretty scarce in its own right. And then to see them in this bright foresty scene, I mean, it's completely night and day. And I always enjoy that when you have like, I mean, it's one of the things I like about stuff like Slime, is like having a character who's very powerful and is very much helping, but instead of just having someone like Makoto, like that was his goal, more so he got dragged into that situation and they're kind of worshipping him as their savior. It's a really entertaining formula, and I wasn't really sure what the purpose of this episode would be other than maybe establishing where they're going to live, you know, training with the abilities, trying to understand the mechanics of this world a bit better. It was going to be a hilarious episode, that much was clear, but I was wondering if there's going to be anything to really, like, hook us into, like, new territory, and then in comes the spider. And when I saw the spider, I was like, oh, that's going to be a very easy to defeat opponent. I wasn't expecting that to be a girl, right? Or to be a creature that would turn into a girl, because the way the contracts work, as long as Makoto is the superior power, they will take a form resembling basically the more powerful being. So if Makoto was the one weaker, he probably would end up in a weird spider form. So I like how in this episode, like when they're like fighting, you know, I mean, just moments prior, the dude literally took out a blade like that big, enhanced it, cut down a tree that none of them could do, and then enhanced his own body to carry it like he was the Incredible Hulk. When I saw a giant spider, I was like, okay, I mean, yeah, it's probably dangerous, but it's going to go in the direction of, oh, they're going to worship Makoto even more because he defeated a giant-ass spider, especially given the fact that our Dragon Girl was pretty much very nonchalant about saying, like, you can deal with it, so I didn't think there was a real threat there. And while I guess you could probably say there wasn't, all things considered, the dude actually had to struggle quite a bit, and I mean, it wasn't until seemingly he kind of got knocked out and he went into pure rage mode. Seemingly he was holding back quite a bit to not throw any danger towards his comrades or civilization way, but I mean, seriously, when he went absolutely haywire, he pulled out a water bow and just was decimating this creature. I mean, it was pretty badass. I love the animation for the action, especially because there's so many different magical elements at play. Obviously, he's not the best with certain ones, as he says in this episode, but the mixture of like fire and water and how they animate it, it is incredibly well polished. Like, seriously, I said last week, I was surprised by how good it looked. And this episode, I think, just kind of carries on with that. Obviously, things can happen in production. We could get halfway through and maybe the next bit of action that we see don't, you know, resemble what we just saw here. But as it stands, from the non-stop hilarious movements resembling things like, you know, Konosuba and some of the other like comedy series you see with characters always being silly or funny, I mean, it's kind of impressive how little this series dips. I mean, it's colorful, it's vastly detailed in its environment, but still, like, I just still am blown away. The voice actors just continuing to like knock my socks off with like the ridiculously packed VA cast. It's just so good to see how everyone is kind of their own star. As much as I love Makoto, I think his voice actor is probably one of the best casted for his roles. He's not boring, he's not typically serious or very generically basic. He's someone who has a perfect level of goofball, like when he's worshipping basically his god, thanking him for what he considers to be an overpowered skill, because basically it's not using mana seemingly, so he's kind of like really better than a lot of people. Or you have the more kind of, I think, more cool, calm, and collected without being super dry and boring performance, which is kind of like his day-to-day voice. He's just so well done, but I have to say I love all the voice actors. And even though we only got a small glimpse of Mrs. Spider, I mean, when you have, I believe, Nezuko's voice actress clearly doing it, I mean, it's hard not to be like, yeah, that's going to be an amazing casting choice as well, right? It just feels like this production is like an all-star A-team that doesn't look like it on paper. Seriously, the poster image I don't think did it justice with how good it actually is going to look. And, I mean, with how stacked the VA cast is, I mean, this show shouldn't have a dull moment. I'm not saying it can't get serious or things like that, but as it stands with these 2 episodes, it has been very self-aware and is fine being a joke-filled show, right? It's silly, it's goofy, while having elements of so many different Isekai fantasy series that I really enjoy, so it just feels like a perfect stew that maybe when you originally told me the ingredients, I would say, yeah, it's probably not going to taste that great. But after it brewed for a couple of days, I was like, you know what? This is actually pretty damn amazing. Wednesdays are sure to be great. Get Kobayashi, get Tsukimichi. It just feels like it's going to be a great day for anime throughout this entire season. And I mean, this is the type of show you want to see in summer to just make you laugh and have a blast, and that's exactly what it's been doing so far. I definitely like the kind of like hints and like building up about what happened with the family, knowing that the family kind of like came from this world, and just the kind of ideas that are kind of being explored. I think it's so interesting to see how many different world mechanics are at play, from even just our Dragon Girl like reading his memories to watch historical dramas. There's so many little elements at play that I think it didn't need to be this complex, seemingly, even though they're not dropping massive info dumps of explaining how different things are occurring. Visually, you can look at what's happening on screen, and I think that's the perfect way to go about it. When you're writing a light novel or manga, you can have more time to do info dumps and have it not be boring because the medium is all about reading. But in anime, you can use your visual medium and just kind of like seeing things in the distance to explain what's happening without Makoto needing to think out loud, being like, oh, this is what's happening in this world. This anime has a ridiculous amount of detail. For being as funny as it is, I can see so much potential down the line for its narrative, and seeing where Makoto's story is going to go. I imagine it'll cause some chaos eventually, especially given the fact that it seems like every species that he kind of meets are probably going to end up moving in, so who knows what's going to occur, right? Let me know your thoughts and feelings on this week's Tsukimichi episode, and what do you hope to see with the future of this anime down below. Like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time everyone, please take care and have a good one.